Carl Jung writes in his alchemical studies, "A notable aspect of the priest is the leaden homunculus, and this is none other than the leaden spirit or planetary demon Saturn. In Zosimos' day, Saturn was regarded as a Hebrew god. Presumably on account of the keeping holy of the Sabbath, Saturday means Saturn's day. And also on account of the Gnostic parallel with the supreme archon Ialdabaoth, child of chaos, who, as Leondoidis, may be grouped together with Baal, Kronos and Saturn. The later Arabic designation of Zosimos as Al-Ibri, the Hebrew, does not of course prove that he himself was a Jew, but it is clear from his writings that he was acquainted with Jewish traditions. The parallel between the Hebrew god and Saturn is of considerable importance as regards the alchemical idea of the transformation of the God of the Old Testament into the God of the New. The alchemists naturally attached great significance to Saturn, for besides being the outermost planet, the supreme archon, the Haranites named him Primus, and the demiurge Ialdabaoth, he was also the spiritus niger who lies captive in the darkness of matter, the deity, or that part of the deity which has been swallowed up in his own creation. He is the dark god who reverts to his original luminous state in the mystery of alchemical transmutation. As the Aurora Consurgence says, "Blessed is he that shall find this science, and into whom this prudence of Saturn floweth." Dear friends, dear seekers, dear alchemists of the soul, here we are again, staring at the thing that broke Descartes' brain and sent Gödel into exile from his own logic. We keep bumping up against this cosmic joke that has been making fools of brilliant people since they first thought to think about thinking. It's the greatest mystery unfolding before our eyes. Jung handed us a key. It's not any key, it's a leaden one. It's heavy, dense, saturated with the weight of eons. And what does this key unlock? Nothing less than the transformation of God himself. You see, what Jung reveals here is the living wisdom and secret fire that burns inside our hearts. The same fire that Prometheus stole. It's happening to you right now as you encounter these words. A story about time and consciousness, through Jewish mysticism and Gnostic rebellion, through planetary demons and divine prisoners, through the darkest matter and the brightest illumination. This is initiation into a psychological reality that few have eyes to see. Because understanding Saturn, truly understanding what the alchemists saw in this slow, heavy, melancholic planet, means understanding the fundamental drama of our reality. The fall, the redemption, the God who eats his own children and the God who resurrects from lead into gold. Are you ready? Are you truly ready to see how the God of Moses transforms into the God of Christ through the mysterious operations of the alchemical art? Are you ready to understand why Saturday, Saturn's day, the Sabbath, hold the key to this cosmic metamorphosis? If yes, this is Irrevelato speaking, and I'm here to illuminate, to reveal, to pull back the veil and show you the machinery of the divine. We're going deep, deeper than you've perhaps ever gone, into territories where angels fear to tread and demons whisper secrets. But before we descend into these depths, let me tell you why this matters. Why now? Why you? We live in an age where the old gods seem dead and the new ones haven't been born yet. We live in leaden times, saturnine times, times of restriction, limitation, melancholy, time of fear and consumption. But the alchemists knew something we've forgotten. Lead contains gold. The prison contains freedom. The darkness contains light. And that's exactly what we're going to discover together. For those of you who've been with me on this journey, my Patreons, my fellow seekers, my co-conspirators in this great work of consciousness, you know that Irrevelato doesn't do surface business. We go deep. We go to the source. We drink from the fountain of wisdom itself, even if it tastes of lead at first. And for those joining us for the first time, welcome to the mystery school of the 21st century, where ancient wisdom binds with contemporary insight, where Jung meets the Gnostics, where Saturn meets Sunday, where you meet your own divine potential. This video essay, which can be rightly called an initiation, is supported by those who understand that real wisdom requires real commitment. On Patreon, I'm trying to build something extraordinary. I'm trying to build a community focused on transformation. Early access to these deep dives, exclusive content that goes even deeper, direct dialogue with me and fellow seekers, because some truths can only be shared in the inner circle. But whether you support financially or simply with your attention, know this: you're part of something. Something that matters. Something that's waking up. Something that's remembering what we've forgotten. So let's begin. Let's take Jung's key and unlock the first door. The leaden homunculus. What a phrase, what an image, what a presence, what a doorway into the mysterium. Picture it in detail. A little man made of lead, heavy, dense, grey, lifeless yet somehow alive. This is alchemical precision, because the homunculus, the artificial human, the created being, represents something fundamental about our condition. We are the leaden homunculus ourselves. Yes, you and I. We are created beings, fashioned from the heavy matter of the earth, carrying within us something that is thirsty for transformation. The alchemists saw and understood this. They saw that humanity itself is the great work. We are both the prima materia and the philosopher's stone. We are both the lead and the gold. But why lead? Why not iron, copper or tin? Because lead is Saturn's metal, and Saturn, as we'll discover, is the key to everything. Lead is the metal of time, of weight, of endings. It's the metal that protects against radiation, against the forces of transformation. It's the metal of coffins and prisons, but also, paradoxically, the metal that contains the seed of gold. Paracelsus, in his De Natura Rerum, wrote, "Let the sperm of a man by itself be putrefied in a gourd glass, sealed up with the highest degree of putrefaction in horse dung, for the space of 40 days, or so long until it begin to be alive, move and stir, which may easily be seen. After this time it will be something like a man, yet transparent, and without a body. Now after this, if it be every day warily and prudently nourished and fed with the arcanum of man's blood, and be for the space of 40 weeks kept in a constant, equal heat of horse dung, it will become a true and living infant, having all the members of an infant, which is born of a woman, but it will be far less. This we call homunculus, or artificial, and this is afterwards to be brought up with as great care and diligence as any other infant, until it come to riper years of understanding. Now this is one of the greatest secrets that God ever made known to mortal, sinful man. For this is a miracle, and one of the great wonders of God, and secret above all secrets, and deservedly it ought to be kept amongst the secrets until the last times, when nothing shall be hid, but all things be made manifest. Crude, perhaps, bizarre, absolutely. But listen deeper. The times when everything is manifest are here in my humble opinion. The sperm, the creative principle, the logos spermatikos. They must undergo putrefaction, death, decomposition. The 40 days echo Christ in the wilderness, Moses on Sinai, the flood that cleansed the world. At least so it seems to me, independent of my will. And what emerges? Artificial life, created life. The homunculus is what happens when human will attempts to create without divine participation. It's Frankenstein's monster, it's AI, it's every attempt to play God without being God. And the world is accelerating in that direction in a seemingly unprecedented manner. But Jung sees deeper. The homunculus is more than artificial life. It's captured divinity. It's the spark of the infinite trapped in finite form. It's what the Gnostics called the divine spark imprisoned in matter. And this imprisonment, this is Saturn's work. You see, Saturn doesn't only rule time and death. Saturn is the principle of crystallization, of manifestation, of spirit becoming matter. Every physical form is in a sense Saturnine. Every single body is a lead coffin for the soul. But, and here's the alchemical secret, every lead coffin is also a chrysalis. The alchemists spoke of a mysterious child, the son of the philosophers, not born of woman but of art, not natural but fashioned by fire and intention, the symbolic creation of the soul through the labor of transformation. And this artificiality is precisely its power, for what is made can be unmade. What is bound can be freed. What is leaden can become golden. We're all homunculi in this sense, little artificial beings created by the demiurge, trapped in leaden flesh, carrying within us a memory of our true nature. The Gnostics knew this, the alchemists knew this, Jung knew this, and now you know this. But knowing isn't enough. The homunculus must be fed. It must be nurtured. It must undergo the operations: calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. These aren't just chemical processes. They're psychological realities. They're the stages of becoming fully human, which is to say fully divine. There are several alchemical representations of the homunculus emerging from the philosophical egg, born not through the womb, but through the athanor, the alchemical furnace. Born not through nature, but through art. And what is art but nature perfected? What is the artificial but the natural raised to consciousness? This is why the priest, Jung's priest, is associated with the homunculus. The priest is the mediator between the natural and supernatural. The priest performs the artificial act of transubstantiation, turning bread into body, wine into blood. The priest is himself a kind of homunculus, a created being whose purpose is transformation. And we haven't even gotten to the demon yet. Ah, the demon, that word that makes modern minds recoil and turn away their gaze as if they can be possessed in an instant if they hear this word. The concept we've sanitized, psychologized, and explained away. But Jung won't let us off so easily. The planetary demon Saturn, a metaphor, a symbol, maybe. What is certain is that Jung called Saturn a demon. But what is a demon, really, if we strip away the Hollywood horror, the medieval fear, and the religious moralizing? What remains? A mediating intelligence, a force between the divine and the human, a power that partakes of both spirit and matter. In Greek, daimon simply means divider or allotter, the one who divides, the one who portions out fate. He is a guide more than a malevolent force. It is the entity that told Socrates what not to do. And Saturn is the great divider, the one who says this far and no further, the one who builds walls, sets limits, and creates boundaries. Time itself is Saturn's ultimate boundary. Death is Saturn's ultimate division. But remember that every boundary is also a doorway, and every limit is also a definition. Every death is also a birth. The Chaldean oracles and the Neoplatonic tradition that followed speak of demonic intelligences dwelling in the planetary spheres, ministers of fate who govern the soul's descent into matter. These are not demons in the modern sense, but daimons, cosmic intermediaries, rulers of the sublunar realm, and executors of Haimamene, the binding force of destiny. Born of nature, yet ruled from above, they fasten the soul to the wheel of becoming, until through purification and ascent, it remembers its celestial origin. Thus, in the vision of the oracles, the planetary daimons are the governors of fate, not to be feared, but to be understood and ultimately transcended. But Saturn's demon is special. Why? Because Saturn stands at the threshold. In ancient cosmology, Saturn was the outermost visible planet. Saturn stands at the edge of the planetary spheres. Beyond him lies the realm of the fixed stars, unmoving, eternal in pattern. Beyond them, the primum mobile turns all things, and beyond all motion, untouched by time, radiates the Empyrean, the source of all light, the dwelling of God, and the final goal of the soul's ascent. Thus, Saturn is the dweller on the threshold, the last challenge before transcendence. Marsilio Ficino, the Renaissance magus, philosopher and scholar, extensively explored planetary influences, notably the complex and ambivalent nature of Saturn, in his seminal work, De Vita Libri Tres. Within this text, particularly in the third book, De Vita Coelitus Comparanda, Ficino addresses the delicate health and spiritual well-being of the scholar who is uniquely susceptible to Saturn's profound yet precarious influence. Scholars, Ficino notes, are naturally prone to extremes of melancholy due to Saturn's dominance. Saturn's melancholic temperament, though potentially debilitating, is also deeply generative, providing precisely those qualities indispensable for philosophy and inner transformation: depth, contemplation, profound wisdom, and insight into hidden truths. To counteract Saturn's excessive melancholy, Ficino prescribes intentional harmonization with the more benign planetary influences, notably the Sun, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. He identifies three primary remedies to soothe the scholar's vulnerable spirit: aromatic substances and wines, clean air and pleasant odors, and perhaps most importantly, music. Music, Ficino asserts, holds a special primacy among these remedies. because its harmony is exactly what the scholar's refined and subtle spirit needs and feels connected to. In an eloquent prose, he argues, "If the vapours exhaled by merely vegetable life are greatly beneficial to your life, how beneficial do you think will be aerial songs to the spirit, which is indeed entirely aerial, harmonic songs to the harmonic spirit, warm and thus living to the living, endowed with sense to the sensitive, conceived by reason to the rationale. Thus, through talismans, music, and harmonizing planetary influences, Ficino not only warns of Saturn's potential dangers, but also reveals the means by which its melancholy may be channeled toward philosophical depth and the profound transformation of the self." And here's where it gets interesting. The Arabic magical tradition, preserved in texts like the Picatrix, describes specific rituals for invoking the planetary demons. For Saturn, the ritual requires lead, black cloth, and the day and hour of Saturn. But what is being invoked? An aspect of consciousness itself, a way of being, a mode of experience. The Picatrix prescribes specific materials and timings for rituals aimed at invoking Saturn's influence. For instance, one ritual involves draw the figures written below with the tooth of a black dog on a plate of black lead in the day and hour of Saturn, with Saturn rising in the third face of Capricorn. This ritual is intended to dissolve friendships, revealing the text's approach to harnessing planetary energies for specific outcomes. Additionally, the Picatrix details appropriate attire for such rituals. Put on black clothes, namely the cloth used to wrap a corpse, and a black cape in the mode of a doctor, and black shoes. These elements, lead, black cloth, specific planetary hours, are deeply rooted in the symbolic associations of Saturn with qualities like gravity, melancholy, and introspection. Jung understood this. When he speaks of Saturn as a demon, he's not being primitive or superstitious. He's being precise. He's pointing to something that can't be reduced to psychology or explained away as projection. He's pointing to a reality that participates in both the psychic and the cosmic, a reality that is both inner and outer, both personal and transpersonal. The demon of Saturn is the initiator, the one who brings necessary limitation, necessary suffering, and necessary death, but also the one who guards the treasure. Remember, in alchemy, the dragon that guards the gold is the gold in its unredeemed form. The demon that binds is the angel that frees. It's all a matter of transformation. Saturn, in his role as initiator, brings the very conditions that crack consciousness open to higher realities. The demon that binds becomes the angel that frees, but only through understanding the alchemical process of transformation. Agrippa's theory of melancholic inspiration reveals exactly how this transformation occurs. Writing in his 3 books of occult philosophy, he presents what amounts to a field guide for Saturn-induced genius, which is not mental illness as we understand it, but a specific physiological state that makes humans receptive to spiritual possession by various orders of non-human intelligences. The key insight: there are 2 types of melancholy. Pathological black collar attracts demons and causes destructive madness, but purified white collar, the melancholy humour aligned with Saturn's cold, dry nature, enables prophecy and genius. Saturn's influence amplifies this condition, withdrawing the mind from worldly affairs and elevating it toward divine knowledge. What follows is a systematic explanation of how different levels of consciousness can be possessed by different types of spirits, each granting specific kinds of knowledge. At the imaginative level, elemental spirits bestow technical skills, explaining sudden artistic mastery. At the rational level, planetary intelligences reveal natural philosophy and political prophecy. At the highest level, angelic beings disclose divine mysteries and biblical prophecy. This is Renaissance high theory, an attempt to explain genius, inspiration, and prophetic knowledge as literal supernatural phenomena operating according to discoverable cosmic laws. As Agrippa puts it, madness brings genius, and Saturn is the planetary patron of this sacred madness. Again, what follows is a very long passage from Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. Problems saith that the Sibyls and the Bacchides, and Niceratus the Syracusan and Ammon, were, by their natural melancholy complexion, prophets and poets. The cause, therefore, of this madness, if it be anything within the body, is a melancholy humour. Not that which they call black choler, which is so obstinate and terrible a thing, that the violence of it is said by physicians and natural philosophers, besides madness, which it doth induce, to draw or entice evil spirits to seize upon men's bodies. Therefore we understand a melancholy humour here to be a natural and white choler. For this, when it is stirred up, burns and stirs up a madness conducing to knowledge and divination, especially if it be helped by any celestial influx, especially of Saturn, who, seeing he is cold and dry, as is a melancholy humour, hath his influence upon it, increaseth and preserveth it. Besides, seeing he is the author of secret contemplation, and estranged from all public affairs, and the highest of all the planets, he doth, as he withdraws his mind from outward business, so also make it ascend higher, and bestows upon men the knowledge and presages of future things. And this is Aristotle's meaning in his Book of Problems. By melancholy, saith he, some men are made, as it were, divine, foretelling things to come, and some men are made poets. He saith also that all men that were excellent in any science were for the most part melancholy. Democritus and Plato attest the same, saying that there were some melancholy men that had such excellent wits that they were thought and seemed to be more divine than human. So also there have been many melancholy men at first rude, ignorant and untractable, as they say Tynnichus, Hesiod, Ion, Calcinenses, Homer and Lucretius were, who on a sudden were taken with a madness and became poets, and prophesied wonderful and divine things which they themselves scarce understood. Whence Plato in Ion saith that many prophets, after the violence of their madness was abated, do not well understand what they wrote, yet treated accurately of each art in their madness, as all artists, by reading of them, judge. So great also, they say, the power of melancholy is of, that by its force celestial spirits also are sometimes drawn into men's bodies, by whose presence and instinct antiquity testifies, men have been made drunk and spake most wonderful things. And this thing, they think, happens under a threefold difference, according to a threefold apprehension of the soul, viz. Imaginative, rational and mental. They say, therefore, that when the mind is forced with a melancholy humour, nothing moderating the power of the body, and passing beyond the bounds of the members, is wholly carried into imagination, it doth suddenly become a seat for inferior spirits, by which the mind oftentimes receives wonderful ways and forms of manual arts. So we see that any most ignorant man doth presently become an excellent painter or contriver of building, and to become a master in any such art. But when these kinds of spirits portend to us future things, they show those things which belong to the disturbing of the elements and changes of times, as rain, tempests, inundations, earthquakes, slaughter, great mortality, famine, and the like. As we read in Aulus Gellius that his priest, Cornelius Paterus, did, at the time when Caesar and Pompey were to fight in Thessalia, being taken with a madness, foretell the time, order, and issue of the battle. But when the mind is turned wholly into reason, it becomes a receptacle for middle-world spirits. Hence it obtains the knowledge and understanding of natural and human things. So we see that a man sometimes doth on a sudden become a philosopher, physician, or an orator, and foretells mutations of kingdoms and restitutions of ages, and such things as belong to them, as did the Sibyl to the Romans. But when the mind is wholly elevated into the understanding, then it becomes a receptacle of sublime spirits, and learns of them the secrets of divine things, such as the law of God, and the orders of angels, and such things as belong to the knowledge of things eternal, and the ascent of souls. It foresees things which are appointed by predestination, such as future prodigies or miracles, the prophet to come, and the changing of the law. End of quote. Agrippa is right. Madness is all around you and inside you, and madness brings genius. Schopenhauer found plenty of them in asylums. Saturn, the planetary demon who seems to limit and bind, reveals himself as the supreme initiator, the one who creates the conditions necessary for transcendence. The melancholic temperament isn't a curse, but a calling, not pathology, but potential divinity. This is the alchemical secret Jung recognized. The dragon guarding the treasure is the treasure in unredeemed form. Saturn's apparent opposition to human flourishing conceals his deeper function as cosmic educator. Through limitation, suffering, and the withdrawal from worldly affairs, he prepares consciousness for reception of the divine. The demon becomes an angel not by changing his nature, but by revealing what his nature always was. We're all touched by this Saturnine madness, all candidates for this strange initiation. The question is not whether we will encounter limitation, melancholy, and the withdrawal from ordinary consciousness, but whether we will recognize these experiences as invitations to a deeper reality, whether we will allow Saturn's influence to elevate rather than depress, to inspire rather than merely restrict. The 3 levels of spiritual possession Agrippa describes aren't ancient curiosities, but living possibilities. In moments of creative breakthrough, technical mastery arriving from nowhere, prophetic insight piercing the veil of appearances, we glimpse what the Renaissance magus systematized: that consciousness can indeed become a receptacle for intelligences greater than the merely human. Saturn's madness is all around us and within us. The only question is whether we will let it make us a genius. Yet Saturn has many names, and one of the most important names that Jung hints at without stating it directly is Ialdabaoth, the child of chaos, the lion-faced one, the Gnostic demiurge who created this world of matter and proclaimed himself the only God. "I am God and there is no other," he declared, in his ignorance of the higher realms. And for his hubris, he became the archon of this world, the prince of this cosmos, the God of the Old Testament, at least according to the Gnostics. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we must understand Zosimos, the mysterious alchemist who saw in Saturn the Hebrew god. Zosimos of Panopolis. Even the name carries mystery. 3rd century Alexandria, the melting pot where Greek philosophy met Egyptian magic, met Jewish mysticism, and met nascent Christianity, where the Hermetic teachings flourished, where gnosis was in the air like incense. And into this heady atmosphere steps Zosimos, an alchemist, a mystic, a visionary, the one who wrote down the visions that would persist through centuries, the one who saw in his dreams the cosmic drama of transformation played out in vessels and furnaces, in metals and operations. His most famous vision? The one where he sees Aeon, the priest who sacrifices himself and is transformed. "I am Aeon, the priest of the inner sanctuaries, and I submit myself to an unendurable torment." The priest becomes the sacrificer becomes the sacrificed. The lead becomes gold through willing submission to the process. But Zosimos saw more than chemical operations. He saw the soul's journey. He saw that alchemy was not about making gold, but about becoming gold. Not about transforming matter, but about matter transforming us. Every operation in the laboratory was simultaneously an operation in the soul. And Saturn, for Zosimos, Saturn was the beginning and the end, the alpha and omega of the work, the black phase, the nigredo, where everything must be reduced to prima materia before it can be rebuilt, but also the final phase, where the philosopher's stone emerges in its full glory, the lead that becomes gold, the death that becomes life. The Arabic alchemists would later call him Al-Ibri, the Hebrew, not necessarily because he was Jewish, but because he understood the Jewish mysteries. He understood the connection between Saturn and the Sabbath, between the planet of restriction and the day of rest, between the God of time and the God beyond time. Zosimos understood something profound about the nature of his art. In one of his genuine surviving fragments, he writes, "The symbol of chemistry is drawn from the creation by its adepts who cleanse and save the divine soul bound in the elements and who free the divine spirit from its mixture with the flesh. This is the alchemical vision in its purest form, the liberation of imprisoned divinity. Every metal contains a soul. Every substance holds a spark of the divine light, trapped and waiting for release. The alchemist doesn't create gold. He frees the gold that was always there, bound in the lead, dreaming of its true nature." Zosimos also taught that the very word for the art came from divine revelation. He traced alchemy back to the fallen angels who, according to the Book of Enoch, became enamored of women, and descending taught them all the works of nature. From them, therefore, is the first tradition, Chema, concerning these arts. The word chemistry itself carries the memory of this celestial instruction, this forbidden knowledge passed from angels to humans, hidden, occult, not because it's deliberately concealed, but because it requires eyes to see. And what gives us these eyes? Saturn, the planet of deep contemplation, the planet of solitude and meditation, the planet of those who seek the hidden wisdom. But Zosimos goes further. He connects alchemy explicitly with spiritual transformation. In his authentic definition of the art, he speaks of embodying and disembodying, drawing the spirits from bodies and bonding the spirits within bodies. For him, pneuma, spirit or breath, plays an integral role as both the agent of transformation and the substance being transformed. This is their intimate union. This pneumatic vision would later flower into what alchemists called the chemical wedding, the mysterium conjunctionis, the marriage of opposites that Jung identified as central to the alchemical opus. But the seeds are already there in Zosimos's insistence that material and spiritual conversion are inseparable processes. And at the center of Zosimos's cosmic vision, the figure of the anthropos, the archetypal human. Zosimos explicitly describes this primal being. The Egyptians call him Thoth, interpreter of all things, while the Jews and other Near Eastern peoples call him Adam, meaning earth. But this anthropos contains both the man of flesh and an inner man of spirit whose name is Phos, light itself. This figure anticipates what the Kabbalists would later systematize as Adam Kadmon, the cosmic human who contains all possibilities but has fallen, scattered and imprisoned in matter, waiting for redemption, waiting for someone who understands the art to perform the operations that will restore the original unity. This is what Zosimos saw in his famous visions. Chemical processes and cosmic dramas and personal transformation and universal redemption, the freeing of the light trapped in matter, the restoration of the fallen world. His Saturn-influenced melancholy becomes the very condition for seeing through the veils of matter to the light waiting within. And who is this Saturn? According to Zosimos, none other than the Hebrew God, the God of the Sabbath, the God who rested on the seventh day, but also, and here's where it gets truly profound, the God who needs redemption, the God who fell into his own creation, the God who became the demiurge. Enter Ialdabaoth. Ialdabaoth. The name itself is a barbarous incantation, a word of power, a formula that opens doorways better left closed, or so the Church Fathers warned. But we're not here for safety, we're here for truth. And the truth is that Ialdabaoth is a fundamental component of reality. Child of chaos. That's what the name means. Born from Sophia's error, according to the Gnostic myth. Born from wisdom's fall. You see, Sophia, wisdom herself, desired to create without her consort. She wanted to know the unknowable, to create like the ultimate God. And from this presumption, this cosmic hubris, came forth Ialdabaoth. Imagine it, a being born from a goddess's mistake, a cosmic abortion, malformed, ignorant of his true origins, possessing tremendous power but not wisdom. He looks around at the void and sees no other gods, because Sophia in shame has hidden him behind a veil. And in his ignorance he declares, I am God, and there is no other. The Apocryphon of John describes him. Ialdabaoth has many faces, more than all that have been listed, so he can convey any face he wants to the seraphim around him. But what is the main face? Sophia saw what her desire produced. It changed into the form of a dragon with a lion's head and eyes flashing lightning bolts. The lion faced God, the Leontoides. Why a lion? Because the lion is the king of beasts, the solar animal, the symbol of royalty and power. But also because the lion devours, consumes, destroys. This is Saturn in his darkest aspect, the god who eats his children, Kronos with blood on his lips, time that consumes all things, matter that imprisons the spirit, the creation that has forgotten its creator. But here's the alchemical secret. Ialdabaoth is not evil, he's ignorant. There's a difference. Evil knows and chooses darkness. Ignorance simply doesn't know the light exists. And ignorance can be enlightened. The demiurge can remember his origins. The fallen god can rise. And this distinction makes all the difference in the world. The Gnostics were not dualists, despite what the Church Fathers claimed. They were radical monists who understood that the one had become many, and that the many must return to the one. Ialdabaoth is not the enemy of the true God. He is the true God in his state of self-forgetting. He is divinity experiencing itself as limitation. Think about this deeply and carefully. What does it mean for chaos to have a child? Chaos, the primal void, the unlimited potential, the womb of all possibilities, gives birth to order. But it's the wrong kind of order. It's an order without wisdom, power without understanding, creation without consciousness. This is our world, according to the Gnostics, created by a God who doesn't know he's not God, ruled by a cosmic tyrant who is himself a prisoner, governed by laws that are themselves lawless. No wonder suffering exists. No wonder limitation binds us. No wonder death stalks the earth. But, and this is crucial, Ialdabaoth carries within himself the seed of his own transformation, because he was born from Sophia. Wisdom is his mother, even if he doesn't know it. And what is born from wisdom, however distorted, carries the essence of wisdom the same way every atom contains the seed of the entire universe. The child of chaos is also the grandchild of order. The fallen god is still a god. The notorious Gnostic text, Pistis Sophia, describes Ialdabaoth's eventual redemption. After eons of ruling as a tyrant, he finally recognizes the light above him. He repents. He is transformed. The lion face becomes the face of a child. The devourer becomes the nourisher. Saturn releases his children from his belly. This is the transformation Jung is pointing toward. The God of the Old Testament, the jealous God, the God of law and limitation, becomes the God of the New Testament, the God of love and liberation. But not through rejection or replacement, through transformation, through the alchemical work, through the recognition that the lead contains gold. And this transformation is both theological and psychological. It's happening to you right now as you read these words. Your own inner Ialdabaoth, your ego, your false self, and your identification with limitation are being confronted with a greater reality. And like all tyrants faced with truth, it has two choices: resist and perish, or surrender and transform. But we're not done with our pantheon of dark gods. Next comes Baal. Baal, the name that made Hebrew prophets foam at the mouth, the rival god, the false god, the abomination. But what if I told you that Baal and Yahweh were more alike than different? What if I told you that the conflict between them was not between truth and falsehood, but between two aspects of the same reality? Baal means lord or master, not a name but a title. The Baal of the Canaanites was the storm god, the fertility god, the one who brought rain and made the crops grow. He fought the sea monster Yam and the death god Mut. He died and was resurrected. Sound familiar? The biblical writers present Baal as the eternal enemy, the golden calf, the false idol, the one who leads Israel astray. But read between the lines, read with Gnostic eyes, what you see is a cosmic turf war between two storm gods. Yahweh on one mountain, Baal on another, both hurling lightning, both demanding sacrifice, both acclaiming exclusive loyalty. How long will you go limping between two different opinions? Elijah asks on Mount Carmel. If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And then comes the contest. Whose fire will consume the sacrifice? Whose power will be revealed? Yahweh wins, of course. It's his book, after all. But the fact that a contest was necessary tells us something. Jung saw this. He saw that Baal, Kronos, Saturn, and Yahweh were masks of the same archetypal reality, the devouring father, the limiting principle, the god of this world, not identical but related, brothers, aspects, faces of the time god who creates and destroys. In Ugaritic texts, Baal is called rider of the clouds. In the Hebrew Bible, Yahweh is called rider of the clouds. This shared epithet points to a common ancient Near Eastern tradition of storm gods who traverse the heavens on their cloud chariots. The theological rivalry between Yahweh and Baal may have masked their shared origins in the figure of the divine stormbringer. Archaeological evidence reveals something equally intriguing. Baal had a consort, Asherah. In Ugaritic texts, she appears as El's wife, Lady Asherah of the Sea. but inscriptions from Kuntilit Adrud speak of Yahweh and his Asherah, suggesting that some ancient Israelites also paired their god with this goddess. Sacred poles representing Asherah stood even in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem until the religious reformers cut them down. The biblical narrative presents this as purification, the removal of foreign contamination from pure Yahweh worship. But viewed through the lens of later esoteric traditions, it represents something else. The separation of complementary divine principles. The masculine storm god, divorced from his feminine counterpart, the principle of limitation and law, severed from the principle of wisdom and grace. This separation created an imbalance that would echo through religious history. The god who declares, "I am alone" in his cosmic isolation, the creator without consort, generating through will rather than wisdom. Later, Gnostic mythology would crystallize this figure in Ialdabaoth, the demiurge who creates in ignorance, the god who mistakes himself for the ultimate reality. This mythic pattern reveals something profound about divine completeness. The alchemists understood this when they sought the chemical wedding, the reunion of separated opposites. They were attempting to heal what they saw as a cosmic wound, the divorce of wisdom from power, of mercy from justice, of the feminine from the masculine divine. The storm god's isolation becomes the condition for his transformation. Saturn, that planet of limitation and melancholy, represents what happens when divine power operates without divine wisdom to temper it. But the very incompleteness creates the longing for wholeness. The very division generates the impulse toward reunion. This is why the tradition speaks of Baal-zebul, lord of the house, rather than Baal-zebub, lord of the flies. The wild storm power must be housed, domesticated, and brought into relationship. Not tamed, transformed through the recovery of what was lost.